New industries can be great for some areas of the world. They can create jobs and turn a depressed area into a thriving community. Many places have recognized the positive impacts on a growing industry, building a manufacturing plant and injecting life into the area. Of course, the opposite can happen, and the closure of a local manufacturer can turn a once growing community into a slum. Sometimes, though, the factory creates a ghost town overnight. Union Carbide India Limited, or UCIL, started operations in 1934 as a subsidiary of the American company Union Carbide Corporation, or UCC. UCC is a large U.S. chemical company that was created by the merger of four separate chemical companies that were founded in the late 1800s. It was purchased by Dow Chemical in 2001, but prior to that it became one of the first U.S. companies to invest in India. The company held a controlling stake of 50.9% in UCIL, while Indian investors, including the government and government-controlled banks, owned the remaining 49.1%. The company's original focus was manufacturing various products like batteries, carbon products, welding equipment, plastics, and marine products. The 1960s saw India's agricultural section become UCC's prime target as the company looked to tap into the growing pesticide market. The Indian government welcomed foreign companies to invest in local industry, and that created a perfect opportunity for UCIL to expand into pesticide production. By 1969, UCIL leased land from the Indian state of Madhya Pradesh and started building a new factory in Bhopal. The plant received approval only to formulate pesticides from imported components in small quantities. Operations began in 1969 as a formulation plant. The facility imported chemical carbaryl from UCC's plant in Institute, West Virginia, and processed it into insecticide brands like Sevin and Temec. Competition in the chemical industry sparked a major strategy change, though, and UCIL adopted a business strategy called backward integration. That's a strategy where a company takes over earlier stages of its supply chain by making the raw materials and intermediate products for the final product at a single facility. The Indian government also pushed UCIL to develop manufacturing capabilities that would cut foreign exchange spending. The company picked Bhopal for its central location in India and reliable transport infrastructure. The area around the site had few residents and was far from the city center in the late 1960s, but that location choice would create problems later. The site in Bhopal was zoned for light industrial and commercial use, not hazardous industry. Local regulations banned polluting activities within 2 kilometers or 1.2 miles of railway stations. The Bhopal plant stood less than a kilometer from the station. Still, Union Carbide was able to persuade the authorities to grant it the necessary clearances. Local authorities later encouraged thousands to settle near the plant and gave land rights to hutment dwellers around the factory. That choice led to many more people living near a facility that would handle highly toxic chemicals. One of those chemicals was methyl isocyanate, or MIC. MIC is a volatile, colorless liquid with a sharp smell. It catches fire easily, might explode when mixed with air, and reacts with water to release heat. MIC stands out as the smallest and most toxic of all isocyanates. The Bhopal plant's chemical process combined methylamine with phosgene to create MIC, which then reacted with 1-naphthol to produce carbaryl, which made the product Sevin. That process made the Bhopal operation unique from other manufacturers who had found MIC-free ways to make carbaryl, though at higher costs. UCC proposed plans to make MIC at the Bhopal factory in 1973, 11 years before the disaster. The MIC production unit's construction started in 1972 and finished in 1980. The facility installed 3 underground 68,000-liter or 18,000-gallon liquid MIC storage tanks, E610, E611, and E619. Money drove the decision to make and store large amounts of MIC on-site instead of importing smaller, safer quantities. By 1984, pesticide demand dropped considerably, but production continued, which led to unused MIC piling up at the Bhopal site. The plant ran at just 1/4 of its production capacity. Those choices set up the conditions for one of history's worst industrial disasters. There were a number of warnings prior to 1984 that the facility was not keeping the area safe from chemical exposure. In 1974, cattle from a local farm strayed to an area where they drank from a small pool of water and soon died. The pool was fed by a rubber hose originating at the chemical plant. Soil analysis showed heavy metal contamination, and wells in the area showed the presence of toxic chemicals. In 1976, 2 trade unions sent letters to the managers of the plant, the factory inspector, and the Minister of Labor of Madhya Pradesh about pollution within the plant, but never received an answer. In 1978, a fire at the plant revealed that hazardous materials were being improperly stored. In 1981, a worker died due to phosgene gas exposures and 2 others were injured. 24 more workers were sent to the hospital after another phosgene gas leak. They all survived. A month later, 18 workers were injured due to an MIC leak. Then there was a major leak of multiple gases in late 1982 that resulted in the evacuation of the plant and a gas cloud moving toward a nearby settlement. Despite a number of smaller gas leaks throughout the following 2 years, not much was done to ensure the safety of the people who lived around the plant or worked there. The worker who died in 1981 had a neighbor who was a journalist. He regularly heard stories from workers about how dangerous the plant was and the likelihood there could be an explosion. He began doing his own research and started writing articles about the plant, with his final article titled "Bhopal on the Brink of Disaster" being published just 5 months before the actual disaster. He had also written letters to the Chief Minister and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court about the situation, but got no response. On October 21, 1984, the nitrogen pressure in tank 610 dropped to 1/5 its normal level, which meant the excess MIC couldn't be extracted. In order to continue production, they switched to tank 611 without investigating the problem with the previous tank. On either November 26th or November 30th, records aren't clear, the nitrogen pressure in tank 611 dropped, and it was only then that workers attempted to repair tank 610, but tank 611 was repaired first, so tank 610 was again abandoned. At just before midnight on December 2nd, an operator spotted a small leak of MIC gas and noticed rising pressure inside tank 610. By 11:30 p.m., employees working in the MIC area started feeling sick from the gas and began looking for where it was coming from. They found a leak at 11:45 p.m. and told the MIC supervisor, who decided to wait until after a scheduled 12:15 a.m. tea break to fix it. Of course, delaying a critical situation has never caused things to get better, so nobody should be surprised when I tell you things only got worse while the workers were relaxing with their tea. Tank 610's temperature shot up beyond what the instruments could measure in just 5 minutes, while pressure jumped up to 280 kilopascals or 40 psi. A concrete slab above the tank cracked and the emergency relief valve burst. The pressure kept climbing to 380 kilopascals or 55 psi even after atmospheric venting started. A UCIL employee finally triggered the plant's alarm at 12:50 a.m. 30 tons of MIC leaked into the air within 45 to 60 minutes, reaching 40 tons in 2 hours. The deadly gas kept escaping until about 2 a.m. The disaster became so severe because 6 critical safety systems failed completely. First, the plant managers had shut down the refrigeration system that should have kept MIC at 0 degrees Celsius in January of 1982 and had removed the Freon by June of 1984. Their reason for turning off that crucial cooling system was to save just $30 a day. Next, someone had disconnected the high-temperature alarm, which should have triggered at 11 degrees Celsius long before the incident. Then the vent gas scrubber that should have neutralized toxic discharge was off for 3 weeks before the disaster. It sat in standby mode without enough caustic soda to handle such a massive leak. On top of that, the flare tower meant to burn escaping MIC gas couldn't work properly. Its connecting pipe was removed for maintenance, but even then it was too small to handle such a big leak. The water spray system couldn't reach the top of the flare tower, making it useless for neutralizing escaping gas. And finally, the warning systems let everyone down. The factory had disconnected public sirens in 1982. Someone briefly turned on the public siren at 12:50 a.m. but quickly shut it off, only turning it back on at 2:15 a.m. after the gas had already spread. To make things worse, in September of 1984, an internal report regarding a UCC plant in West Virginia in the United States revealed a number of defects and malfunctions. The report warned, quote, "A runaway reaction could occur in the MIC unit storage tanks and that the planned response would not be timely or effective enough to prevent catastrophic failure of the tanks." That report was not forwarded on to the Bhopal plant, despite the fact that it was a similar design to the West Virginia plant. MIC gas is heavier than air, so it moved like a deadly blanket through southern Bhopal. The toxic cloud stayed close to the ground as winds pushed it along, affecting about 500,000 people. The gas was thickest over the slums near the factory, then thinned out as it moved over Old Bhopal, finally starting to break up over the lake near New Bhopal. People discovered the danger through terrible first-hand experience rather than warnings. The toxic cloud burned their eyes and lungs instantly as they tried desperately to escape. Survivor Aziza Sultan remembered, quote, "I woke to the sound of my baby coughing badly. The room was filled with a white cloud. I heard people shouting, 'Run, run.' With each breath seemed as if I was breathing in fire." Champa Devi Shukla described the horrific symptoms, quote, "I felt like somebody had filled our bodies up with red chilies. Our eyes had tears coming out, noses were watering, we had froth in our mouths." People ran in panic, causing deadly stampedes in narrow alleyways where street lamps glowed brown through the gas-filled air. Many of the victims died in their sleep, but the ones who awoke or were already awake ran. Unfortunately, their goal was to get away from the factory, which caused many of them to run in the direction of the cloud. Running made many people inhale more of the gas, which ended up killing them more quickly. The emergency systems failed completely. No one outside the factory could hear the alarms, and there were no evacuation routes or detailed emergency plans. Most residents only found out about the danger when they started feeling sick. The chaos split up many families. A survivor who was 4 at the time remembers seeing people running with burning eyes and constant coughing. Her family made it through by following advice from a relative who worked at the chemical plant. They stayed inside and covered themselves with wet blankets. The morning of December 3, 1984 turned Bhopal into a massive morgue. Human corpses and animal carcasses covered the streets as the deadly methyl isocyanate cloud took lives without discrimination. The Indian government's official count showed 3,787 immediate deaths, but that number doesn't come close to showing the true devastation. Nearly 8,000 people lost their lives in just the first 3 days. The death toll kept climbing in the weeks that followed. Over time, experts estimate that more than 22,000 people ended up dying from the toxic gas exposure. It was difficult to keep track of the dead as many deaths weren't recorded. Many families would take their deceased loved ones as soon as they were declared dead. That was likely because mass burials and mass cremations were happening to many bodies. Police picked up a number of bodies near the chemical plant on December 4th and dumped them in the river. A few people weren't actually dead and later woke up floating in the water surrounded by corpses. There were likely people who weren't actually dead who were cremated or buried with the rest of the bodies. Because of those mass disposals, many people were listed as missing for many years without an official record of their death. It was also revealed that no one under the age of 18 was listed as a victim despite the gas being exposed to around 200,000 children, with 1,000 to 4,000 children dying within the first few weeks. It's not known how many children were orphaned. The number of injuries was just as overwhelming. Government documents showed 558,125 injuries, with about 3,900 severe conditions that left people permanently disabled. One of those people would be the station master of the local train station, who stayed there to warn a scheduled train not to stop. He ended up with severe injuries and spent most of his time in hospitals until he died in 2003. Survivors of the initial exposure faced terrible symptoms. Their eyes and lungs burned, they choked and couldn't breathe, they vomited and suffered from blepharospasm, which is when your muscles force your eyes to close. Deaths were generally caused by choking, reflexogenic circulatory collapse, pulmonary edema, or cerebral edema. The affected areas saw people develop tubular necrosis of kidneys, fatty degeneration of the liver, and necrotizing enteritis. The toxic gas hit the most vulnerable people hardest, especially those who lived in crowded slums next to the chemical plant. The local healthcare system couldn't handle the unprecedented level of care needed. Hospitals quickly became overwhelmed, with about 170,000 people needing treatment at hospitals and temporary clinics. Almost 70% of doctors in the worst-hit areas weren't qualified to handle such a catastrophe. Another overlooked detail about the local plant and the chemicals it handled: the medical professionals in the area were not trained on how to treat injuries from those chemicals in the event of a disaster. Medical teams faced an impossible task. They didn't know the right treatment for MIC gas inhalation, so without proper guidance, healthcare workers struggled to ease the suffering of thousands. The Indian government made things worse by closing the plant to outsiders, including UCC representatives, and keeping data private, which added to the confusion about proper medical care. More problems came in the aftermath as food became scarce because suppliers feared for their safety. Authorities stopped all fishing, which limited food options even more. Meanwhile, emergency crews had collected and buried about 2,000 buffalo, goats, and other animals that died from the toxic gas. Generally, we consider people who survived a disaster to be lucky, but these survivors were not, as they still battled severe health conditions 40 years later. The disaster's poisonous aftermath affected not just those who lived through that terrible night, but also their children born years after. Research shows serious lasting damage to multiple body systems: breathing, nerves, muscles, eyes, and hormones. Data from the Sabhavna Trust Clinic shows people exposed to the gas suffer from breathing problems at 1.7 to 2 times the rate of those who weren't exposed. Men who were in their mother's womb during the disaster and lived within 100 kilometers or 62 miles of Bhopal faced cancer risks 27 times higher than others their age. Those same men are also more likely to struggle with work-related disabilities as adults. Women carry their own burdens from the toxic exposure. Research reveals irregular periods and early menopause now plague both the women who breathed the gas and their daughters. Women exposed to the gas face early menopause 2.6 times more often, showing just how deeply the exposure damaged their bodies. Miscarriage rates in affected areas run 7 times above India's average. Mothers also face higher risks of stillbirths and infant deaths. The gas damaged chromosomes, leading to children born with bone problems and weak immune systems. Even worse, the disaster haunts even those born years after 1984. A newer study published in 2023 found that men exposed before birth finished about 2 fewer years of school than their peers. Workers at the Chingari Trust see those problems passed down through generations as they help children with birth defects and learning disabilities. Research from 2016 found birth defects in 9% of babies born to gas-exposed mothers compared to just 1.3% in other mothers. Scientists now know the disaster reached much further than first thought. While officials only counted people within 4.5 kilometers or 2.8 miles as exposed, studies show effects up to 100 kilometers or 62 miles from the plant. That means hundreds of thousands more people suffered than anyone realized. A survivor-turned-activist summed it up by saying, quote, "The disaster still continues to kill and disable a new generation." The contamination has created what experts call a sacrifice zone, which is an area so badly polluted that it devastates local people's health across multiple generations. The environmental damage created a second ongoing catastrophe. The trees surrounding the factory had their leaves turned black. A few days later, the leaves fell off. Trees were visibly damaged up to 1.5 kilometers or almost a mile away from the factory. Vegetable crops had white spots, a sign that they were damaged from the poison. The gas settled onto everything as a layer of white powder that eventually turned green. The abandoned factory site holds about 1.1 million tons of poisoned soil. Tests in 2024 found dangerous chemicals still lurking in the water. Poison has seeped way beyond the factory. Groundwater near the plant contains chemicals that harm every organ, including known cancer-causing substances. A mother of 5 from Tirupur village said, quote, "It's not just waste, it's poison. What's the point of life if we can't breathe clean air or drink clean water?" Bad water now threatens about 200,000 people across 71 villages in Madhya Pradesh state. The government tries to provide clean water, but spotty delivery forces some people to use the tainted groundwater anyway. The chemical plant was shut down by 1986, and most of the equipment was cleaned and sold. The MIC area is still there, though, and is used as storage for contaminated materials. In 1997, Madhya Pradesh's Minister for Culture suggested turning the site into an amusement park. I can't even make this stuff up. There were protests, and the proposal was eventually withdrawn. The Bhopal gas tragedy revealed a disturbing pattern of corporate decisions that put profit ahead of safety. The catastrophe wasn't just an accident. It resulted from years of systematic negligence followed by legal dodging. Ruthless cost-cutting at the plant created what experts called a disaster waiting to happen. It was highlighted by the stark differences between Union Carbide's West Virginia plant and the Bhopal facility that showed how the company ignored safety standards in developing countries. Court testimony revealed that Union Carbide's management ignored warnings about leaking pipes that needed urgent replacement. They told staff to weld damaged pipes to save money. That choice likely allowed water to enter the chemical storage chamber and trigger the deadly reaction. Unsurprisingly, UCC tried to dodge responsibility right after the disaster. The company blamed its Indian subsidiary and claimed UCIL built and ran the plant entirely. UCC then made up stories about unknown Sikh extremist groups and disgruntled employees sabotaging the plant. Many independent sources have rejected those claims. UCC refused to show up in Indian courts despite multiple summonses. One company director boldly stated, quote, "Union Carbide will not appear because, as a United States corporation, it is not subject to India's jurisdiction." The company then pulled a remarkable switch. When cases appeared in U.S. courts, UCC argued they should be tried in India. UCC first offered a $350 million settlement, the amount their insurance would cover, which was turned down. The Union of India was asking for $3.3 billion. UCC eventually agreed to pay $470 million as a complete settlement in February of 1989. That figure came from their disputed claim that only 3,000 people died and 102,000 suffered permanent disabilities. Each victim ended up receiving about $500. A Dow spokesperson later made the heartless comment that the amount was, quote, plenty good for an Indian. The settlement's announcement tells a pretty striking story. UCC's stock jumped 7%. The company's 1988 annual report declared its, quote, best year yet, with record earnings of $4.88 per share. That included the 43 cents per share charge from the Bhopal settlement. That settlement may have been hurt by the fact that the Indian government passed the Bhopal Gas Leak Disaster Act in March of 1985. That made the government the sole representative of the victims, with full authority to litigate on their behalf and settle their claims. That ultimately disempowered the victims from fighting their cause themselves and gave Union Carbide the advantage of being able to offer a settlement that didn't need to be justified in a court of law. The victims who ended up receiving part of the settlement had any amount of relief funds they had received by the Indian government deducted. Dow Chemical bought Union Carbide for $7.3 billion in 2001 but refuses to help Bhopal victims. Clear evidence shows UCC's direct role in plant design and operations, yet Dow claims UCC remains separate and its liability no longer exists. Both companies keep using legal loopholes to avoid accountability. Victim organizations have made their stance clear, saying, quote, Dow Chemicals has made a serious mistake if it thinks the disappearance of the Union Carbide name will bring the Bhopal issue to a close. A major campaign to gain justice for the victims has been happening in Madhya Pradesh ever since the disaster happened. Warren Anderson, the chair and CEO of Union Carbide, arrived in Bhopal on December 7th and was promptly placed under arrest by the authorities in Madhya Pradesh, but was released on bond and allowed to return to the U.S. India's Central Bureau of Investigation filed charges against Anderson and 11 other people from UCC and their subsidiaries in December of 1987, and they were summoned to court. Over the next few years, Anderson and the other accused repeatedly ignored court summons, and in 1992 he was declared liable and his extradition was requested from the U.S. That extradition request was denied by the U.S. government, so the Indian government filed a new request, but it was also denied. Victims of the disaster continued to protest in an attempt to seek justice all the way until Warren Anderson's death in 2014. Women have led the justice movement with their voices amplified by the generational side effects of the gas that affected their bodies. 300 women stormed Dow Chemical's Mumbai office in 2001 and launched hunger strikes to demand accountability. The International Campaign for Justice in Bhopal speaks for 500,000 survivors' demands. The Sambhavna Trust gives free medical care, while the Chingari Rehabilitation Fund provides life-changing therapies to affected families' children. Amnesty International has urged shareholders to withdraw investments from Dow Chemical and asked the Indian government to continue to seek legal remedy from Dow. The Remember Bhopal Museum, opened in 2014, is the first museum in India focusing on a contemporary social movement for justice. The museum showcases artifacts, photographs, protest songs, and posters from the justice movement. Beyond permanent memorials, campaigns like We Are Not Flowers, We Are Flames with Raghu Rai's photographs capture both the disaster's horror and the survivors' determination. The Bhopal disaster is a warning to the world about the dangers of prioritizing profit over people. Cutting costs by sacrificing safety may save a buck now, but it will cost lives later. Still, corporations stay hypnotized by the idea of cutting costs any way they can, and we will continue to see industrial disasters take lives. We can't undo the tragedy that took thousands of lives that December night, but we can learn from it. People continue to fight, not just for monetary compensation, but to show that human life matters more than profits. The real cost of Bhopal stays unknown until companies face serious consequences and victims get proper care. If you want to learn more about the Bhopal disaster, you can read The Bhopal Saga: Causes and Consequences of the World's Largest Industrial Disaster by Ingrid Eckerman. It's available as a PDF download online. A link is in the description. Thanks for watching This Is Monsters. New episodes are uploaded twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. There are occasional bonus episodes covering unsolved cases and criminal history. If you have a suggestion for a case you think I should cover, leave it in the comments. You can always follow the channel on Instagram at thisis_monsters and purchase merch at thisismonsters.com. Thanks so much, and be safe.